Did you know that nearly three-quarters of people who identify as people-pleasers also report feeling profoundly undervalued in their lives? 73%. Now, a statistic is just a number until you see the faces behind it. I've seen them for 40 years. I've seen them in interrogation rooms, lying to protect people who wouldn't give them the time of day, all to avoid an uncomfortable conversation. I've seen them in witness statements, their stories changing with the wind, trying to please whichever lawyer was asking the questions. And I see them now, in retirement. I see them in the community center, the ones who get saddled with organizing every potluck. I see them in families, the grandparents whose generosity is taken for granted, their homes treated like a free daycare and diner. It's a quiet epidemic of self-erasure, and it's born from a single, catastrophic misunderstanding: the belief that being nice earns you respect. It doesn't. It never has. In fact, it often does the exact opposite. It broadcasts a signal of low value, making you a target for manipulation and, worse, irrelevance. We're going to dismantle that belief today. We're going to talk about why your compulsive need to be agreeable is the very thing that is killing the respect you crave, and what you, right now, can start doing about it. This isn't about learning to be cruel or unkind. This is about learning to be effective. It's about understanding the raw mechanics of human interaction, the same mechanics I use to decode criminals, and turning them to your own advantage so you are seen, heard, and valued. Have you ever agreed to something you knew was a bad idea, just to keep the peace and then kicked yourself for it for days afterward? That feeling of resentment is a compass needle, and it's pointing directly at the problem. Let me tell you about a man I'll call Frank. Frank was a witness in a nasty little fraud case. A real snake had charmed his way through half the town, selling phony investment opportunities. Frank lost a little, but his neighbor, a widow named Eleanor, lost everything. We knew Frank saw the whole thing unfold. We knew he had documents. But getting him to testify was like trying to nail jelly to a wall. In our first interview, he was a fountain of agreeability. "Whatever you need, detective," he'd say. "Happy to help." But when it came time to sign an affidavit, he'd get vague. He'd find excuses. He didn't want to upset the suspect's family, who were also in the town. He didn't want the reputation of being that guy, the one who causes trouble. He was so terrified of a little social friction that he was willing to let a predator walk and watch his friend Eleanor eat cat food for the rest of her life. His niceness wasn't a virtue, it was a form of paralysis born from fear. The psychological term for this is conflict avoidance. It's a pattern often learned in childhood, where you're taught that a quiet house is a happy house, and your needs are secondary to keeping things smooth. That conditioning runs deep. It trains your nervous system to treat any form of disagreement as a threat, triggering a primal fear of rejection. So you smile, you nod, you say yes when every fiber of your being is screaming no. But people don't respect fear. They sense it, and on a subconscious level, they either exploit it or dismiss it. Frank thought he was being a good neighbor by not making waves. What he was really doing was telling everyone, including the con man, that his own principles were for sale at the low, low price of avoiding a dirty look. Let's put a name to this condition. The academics call it people-pleasing, but in my line of work, we had a simpler term: the mark. A mark is someone whose internal wiring makes them easy to manipulate. And the chronic people-pleaser is the easiest mark of all, because their primary motivation isn't growth, or justice, or even their own well-being. It's the desperate need for external validation. They outsource their self-worth. It's a weakness, and the world is full of people who are experts at spotting weakness. This isn't something you're born with, it's hammered into you. It comes from being told, "Don't upset your father," or "Just be a good girl and don't talk back." It's a survival strategy that might have served you as a child in a volatile home, but in the adult world, it is a catastrophic liability. The key behaviors are always the same: over-apologizing for things that aren't your fault, suppressing your own needs because you've convinced yourself they're an inconvenience to others, And, most critically, avoiding any and all confrontation. From telling a waiter they got your order wrong to telling your own children they taking advantage of you. I once interrogated a mid-level accountant named Margaret in a corporate embezzlement case. She wasn't the thief, but she was the one who signed off on the falsified expense reports. For months, she knew they were wrong. She saw the numbers didn't add up. But her boss, a charismatic bully, had created a culture where asking questions was seen as being negative or not a team player. Every time her conscience pricked her, he would use a simple phrase, "Come on, Margaret, don't be difficult." And for Margaret, the thought of being seen as difficult was more terrifying than the thought of committing a federal crime. She was so conditioned to seek approval, so terrified of a moment of conflict, that she threw her career and her freedom into a furnace to warm the hands of a man who saw her as nothing more than a tool. When I finally sat her down, she folded in 5 minutes. The relief of finally being caught was overwhelming. She had lived in a prison of niceness for years, and the truth, as ugly as it was a form of liberation. Do you see the pattern? Her niceness wasn't kindness. Kindness is authentic and comes from a place of strength. Margaret's niceness was a desperate shield, a form of self-erasure driven by anxiety. Healthy kindness is being able to tell your friend a hard truth because you care about them. Pathological niceness is lying to them to avoid an uncomfortable 5 minutes, thereby enabling their self-destruction. One builds respect, the other breeds contempt. Have you ever found yourself apologizing for simply taking up space or asking a valid question? This isn't just anecdotal. Studies on assertiveness have shown, time and again, that individuals with people-pleasing tendencies suffer from significantly higher rates of stress, anxiety, and simmering resentment. That resentment is your gut telling you that you are violating your own boundaries. It's a poison you mix for someone else but end up drinking yourself. You think you're keeping the peace, but you're actually declaring a silent internal war on your own self-respect. Let's move from the theoretical to the practical. I'm going to lay out a few scenarios for you, situations I've seen 1,000 times, both in my professional and personal life. I want you to see the clear fork in the road between the passive response, the people-pleaser S response, and the assertive one. Think about the workplace. Let's call him David, a graphic designer, talented but quiet. His boss knows he's reliable. At 4:45 p.m. on a Friday, the boss drops a new project on his desk. "I need this by Monday morning." "You're a lifesaver, David." The passive response is the one David always gives. He sighs internally, cancels his weekend plans with his family, and says, "Of course, no problem." He works all weekend, fueled by lukewarm coffee and resentment. On Monday, he delivers. The boss says, "Thanks," without even looking up. David gets no recognition, no overtime, and when promotions are announced next quarter, he's overlooked for being a great support player, not a leader. Now, the assertive response. When the boss drops the project, David looks him in the eye and says calmly, "I understand this is important. My weekend is committed to my family, but I can come in early on Monday and make this my top priority. If it absolutely has to be done by Monday morning, let's talk about which of my other projects can be pushed back to make room for it." Notice what happened. He didn't say no rudely. He stated his boundary, affirmed the project's importance, and offered a collaborative solution. The outcome? The boss, faced with a reasonable professional instead of a doormat, is forced to respect his time. David protects his personal life and is seen not as a tool, but as a strategic partner who manages his workload responsibly. He gains respect. Or consider the social world, especially for those of you who might be dating again later in life. Let's take a woman named Carol. She meets a man who seems charming. He calls her at the last minute for dates. He changes plans constantly. He knows she'll always be available. The passive response is for Carol to drop everything whenever he calls. He texts at 8 p.m. for a 9 p.m. drink. She rushes to get ready. She never expresses her own preferences for where to go or what to do. She's so afraid of seeming demanding that she becomes a blank slate. The result? He sees her as convenient, not captivating. He gets bored and drifts away. The assertive response? When he calls late, she answers warmly, "It's so good to hear from you. I'm already settled in for the night, but I'd love to see you. Let's plan something for Thursday. Does that work for you?" She communicates interest while simultaneously signaling that her time is valuable and her life is full. She suggests a plan, taking an active role. The outcome? She's no longer just an option, she's a person with her own life. Her self-respect makes her more attractive, more intriguing. This creates a foundation for genuine connection, not just casual convenience. Have you ever found yourself in a social situation, going along with the group's decision even when you wanted to do something completely different? Think about the slow drip of resentment that builds up from 1,000 of those tiny self-betrayals. The passive route always leads to frustration. The assertive one builds self-worth. It's not a mystery, it's cause and effect. So, why does this happen? Why does the very behavior you think will make people like you so often cause them to disrespect you? It's not because people are inherently cruel. It's because they are wired to respond to signals of value and status. When you are overly accommodating, you are sending a clear, albeit subconscious, signal. My needs, my time, and my opinions are less important than yours. In any social hierarchy, whether it's an office or a wolf pack, this signals low status. And people, by instinct, afford less respect to those they perceive as lower on the ladder. It's a harsh truth, but it's a truth nonetheless. Your constant agreeability makes you predictable, and predictability is boring. There's no challenge, no intrigue. People are drawn to those with boundaries, with a clear sense of self, because it presents a landscape they have to navigate. A person who has their own opinions, their own schedule, their own no, is a person of substance. A person who is a universal yes is a utility, like a public drinking fountain. Useful, but not valued. I worked a long-term con case once. The victim was a retired schoolteacher named Arthur, same name as me, which always stuck with me. He lost his entire pension. The con artist wasn't some slick, fast-talking salesman. He was a quiet, unassuming man who presented himself as a friend. His technique was simple. He would make small, escalating requests. First, he asked Arthur for a ride to the store, then help with some paperwork, then a small loan of $100, then a larger one. Each time, Arthur, a profoundly nice man who lived to be helpful, agreed without question. He was so desperate for the friendship, so terrified of offending this new companion, that he never stopped to ask the hard questions. He ignored every red flag. The con artist later told us in an interview, he was the perfect mark. He was so eager to please, you knew he'd never say no. Once I knew that, the rest was just a matter of time. Arthur's niceness wasn't just a personality trait, it was a vulnerability, a gaping hole in his defenses that the predator saw from a mile away. This isn't just a criminal dynamic. It's the so-called friend zone effect in relationships. It's the employee who gets passed over for promotion. The absence of tension, of self-respect, reduces your influence and attraction. It also creates an internal backlash. Every time you swallow your needs, you feed a monster of resentment inside you. Eventually, that monster gets out. It might be a sudden, out-of-proportion outburst at a loved one over something trivial, leaving everyone confused. That's the pressure valve releasing on months of self-imposed silence. There's science to back this up. Researchers at Stony Brook University found that individuals who demonstrate assertive behaviors are consistently rated by their peers as more competent, more trustworthy, and even more likable than their passive counterparts. Think about that. The very thing you're afraid of, disapproval, is what you're actually creating with your passive behavior. When have you seen someone's firm but polite no actually increase your respect for them? It happens all the time. We admire strength, not submissiveness. All right, so we've dissected the problem. Now, let's talk about the solution. This is the field manual for recalibrating respect. It's not about a personality transplant. It's about learning a new set of tactical skills. This will feel unnatural at first. It will feel uncomfortable. That's a sign that it's working. Step 1 is to conduct surveillance on yourself. For the next week, I want you to be a detective in your own life. Carry a small notebook or use an app on your phone. Your only job is to notice and log every time you default to yes when you want to say no, every time you apologize unnecessarily, every time you silence your own opinion to keep the peace. Don't judge it, just observe. My daughter asked me to babysit on Friday night. I'm exhausted. But I said yes. My friend chose a restaurant I dislike. I said, sounds great anyway. At my book club, I disagreed with an interpretation but said nothing. This isn't about shaming yourself. It's about gathering intelligence. You cannot fight an enemy you do not understand. And your enemy right now is a lifetime of reflexive, passive behavior. You need to see the pattern before you can break it. Step 2 is to practice the respectful no. Most people-pleasers think no is a 4-letter word that comes with the slam of the door. It isn't. A well-delivered no is an instrument of clarity and respect. The formula is simple: empathy, statement of fact, and optional collaboration. Let yes say your neighbor asks you to water his plants for 2 weeks while he is gone, but you know it's a major inconvenience. The old you says, of course. The new you says, I appreciate you thinking of me and trusting me with your plants. Unfortunately, my schedule won't allow me to do that this time. That's it. You don't need a 10-minute excuse. You don't need to lie about a fictional sick aunt. No is a complete sentence. If you want to soften it, you can add the collaborative piece. I hope you find someone. Let me know if you want the name of the high school kid down the street who does odd jobs. You are being kind, but firm. Your boundary is clear. Step 3. Use I statements. This is about taking ownership of your needs. Instead of saying, you're always making me late, which is accusatory, you say, I feel very stressed when I'm late, so I need to leave by 7 p.m. Instead of hinting, it's a bit drafty in here, you state clearly, I'm cold. Could we please close the window? This isn't selfish, it's direct and honest communication. It gives people clear information to work with, instead of forcing them to read your mind. Finally, step 4. Set micro-boundaries. You don't learn to swim in a tsunami. You start in the shallow end. This week, your mission is to set one tiny boundary. Decline one minor request. Share one real opinion on a low-stakes topic. Ask for one small thing you need. Maybe you tell the person on the phone, I'm sorry, I don't take unsolicited calls, and hang up. Maybe you tell your spouse, I'd like to watch my show tonight instead of yours. It will feel like a rebellion. Let it. Each tiny act of self-advocacy is a building block for a stronger foundation of self-respect. What is one small no you could realistically practice this week? As you start to build this new skill set, it's crucial to understand the kind of authority you're building. In my world, we saw 2 fundamental types of influence, and they are worlds apart. We can call them dominance and prestige. Understanding the difference is the key to ensuring you become assertive, not aggressive. Dominance is the path of the bully, the tyrant, the petty dictator. It's respect born of fear. A dominant leader controls through intimidation, threats, and coercion. Think of a drill sergeant screaming at a recruit or a crime boss making a veiled threat. They get compliance, yes, but it's brittle. It lasts only as long as they are present and powerful. The moment their back is turned, loyalty evaporates. Resentment festers under the surface, and people look for the first opportunity to undermine them. This is a short-term, high-maintenance form of power. It's the fool's gold of respect. It looks shiny, but it's worthless. Many people, when they first try to escape the trap of being too nice, overcorrect and swerve into dominance. They become prickly, aggressive, and rude because they mistake that for strength. It isn't. It's just a different kind of fear, their own fear, masked by anger. Prestige is the opposite. Prestige is the path of the expert, the mentor, the true leader. It's respect born of admiration and trust. You do not follow a prestigious leader because you're afraid of them. You follow them because you believe in their skill, their knowledge, and their judgment. Think of a brilliant surgeon you willingly put your life in the hands of, or a wise elder whose advice you actively seek. Their influence is voluntary. People are drawn to them. This kind of respect is durable. It creates genuine loyalty and collaboration. It doesn't require constant threats to maintain, because it's built on a solid foundation of proven competence and integrity. So, where does assertiveness fit in? Assertiveness is the bridge that allows you to build prestige. It is the tool you use to communicate your value, your boundaries, and your needs clearly and confidently without resorting to the bully's tactics. When you say, "I cannot take on that project right now, but I can recommend someone who would do an excellent job," you are not dominating. You are demonstrating that you have a clear understanding of your own capacity and you are still being helpful. When you state your needs directly using I statements, you are not being aggressive, you are being honest, which builds trust. Dominance says, "My needs are all that matter." Passivity says, "Your needs are all that matter." Assertiveness says, "My needs matter and your needs matter. Let's find a way forward that respects both." I knew 2 sergeants in my precinct. One ran his squad through fear. His team filed reports on time, but they never innovated, never volunteered for tough assignments, and had the highest transfer rate. The other sergeant ran his squad through expertise and mutual respect. He advocated for his detectives, listened to their input, but held a firm line on standards. His team had the highest clearance rate in the city for a decade. One had dominance, the other had prestige. Which one do you think truly had the respect of his people? Now, it's time for you to move from theory to action. I'm giving you an assignment. Call it the 7-Day Respect Recalibration Challenge. This isn't a game. This is a field exercise designed to start rewiring decades of faulty programming. For 1 week, your mission is to perform one small, assertive act each day. I've already given you the list of tactics. Conduct surveillance on your patterns, use the respectful no, make I statements, and set micro-boundaries. Your job is to pick one of those and execute it every single day. On Monday, your challenge might be to simply state your preference. When your friend asks where you want to go for lunch, don't say, "I don't care, wherever you want." Say, "I'm in the mood for Italian. How does that sound?" On Tuesday, it might be declining a non-essential request. When a charity you don't support calls for a donation, don't listen for 5 minutes and then make an excuse. Say, "Thank you for the call, but I'm not interested," and hang up. On Wednesday, maybe you catch yourself about to apologize for someone else bumping into you in the grocery store, and you stop yourself. You just say, "Excuse me," and move on. On Thursday, you ask for what you want directly. "I'd like a window seat. Could you please turn the music down a little?" Small, deliberate, consistent. Now, I have to give you a warning. A blunt one. When you start to change the rules of engagement, you must expect pushback. The people in your life who are accustomed to you being a perpetual yes man or yes woman are not going to like the new you at first. Your daughter, who is used to you dropping everything to babysit, might get pouty when you say, "I can't this Friday, I have plans." Your colleague who dumps his work on you might act offended when you say, "I don't have the capacity for that right now." They will resist the change. They might even try to guilt you, calling you selfish or unhelpful. Do not interpret this as failure. This pushback is the single greatest indicator that what you are doing is working. It is confirmation that they have noticed your new boundary. Their discomfort is a sign of the system recalibrating. Stand your ground. Hold the line politely, calmly, but firmly. Your goal is not to win their approval in that moment. Your goal is to teach them how you now expect to be treated. It's a short-term pain for a long-term gain in respect. So, here's your call to action. I want you to go to the comment section right now. First, tell me what your biggest people-pleasing struggle is. Is it at work? With your family? With your friends? Naming it gives you power over it. Second, I want you to commit to one specific boundary you will set this week. Write it down. This week, I will not answer work emails after 6 p.m. This week, I will tell my friend I can't lend him any more money. This week, I will take 1 hour for myself every day without apology. Making a public declaration creates accountability. This is your first assertive act. Do it now. Let's bring this all together. We've dissected the anatomy of the nice guy paradox. We've looked at the psychological wiring that traps you in a cycle of self-neglect, and we've laid out a clear, actionable plan to break free. But there's one final thought I want to leave you with, a core principle that you must hold on to as you undertake this work. This entire endeavor, learning to say no, setting boundaries, stating your needs, is not an exercise in becoming a hard, unfeeling person. It is the exact opposite. It is the only path to becoming a genuinely kind one. Think about it. The kindness that comes from a place of fear and obligation isn't kindness at all. It's a transaction. You're giving your time, your energy, your agreement, but you're doing it to buy something. Approval, safety, the avoidance of conflict. This is why it leads to resentment. The person on the receiving end may not consciously know this, but they feel the hollowness of the transaction. They feel the lack of a solid core, and so they don't value the gift. True, authentic kindness can only come from a place of strength and abundance. When you have a strong sense of your own worth, when your own boundaries are secure, and when your own needs are met, you are no longer operating from a place of deficit. You are full. And when you give from that place of fullness, you can give freely, without resentment, without expecting anything in return. When a person with strong self-respect chooses to help you, it feels different. It feels like a genuine gift, not a nervous appeasement. That is what people value. That is what they respect. The man who can say no to 9 requests makes his one yes incredibly powerful. The woman who doesn't need everyone's approval is the one whose approval everyone seeks. So, as you go forward, remember that every boundary you set is an act of self-respect. And self-respect is not the same as selfishness. It is the non-negotiable prerequisite for a healthy, balanced, and effective life. You have spent decades, perhaps, prioritizing the comfort of others over your own integrity. That is not a virtue. It is a habit, and a destructive one. It's time to learn a new habit. The habit of honoring your own existence. The world doesn't need another doormat. It needs you, with your unique opinions, your finite energy, and your invaluable time, used wisely and with purpose. Don't be nice, be kind, but above all, be respected, and that starts with respecting yourself.